In today's episode, we're speaking to Allyson Scammell. Allyson is a master intuitive coach and a soul guide to spiritual leaders and entrepreneurs. Her mission is to help high-level leaders and business owners remove their blocks that are tethering them down and align them to soul purpose so they can experience quantum success. Allyson has coached and mentored thousands of women in the realm of spiritual growth and business growth, launched a top-tier podcast, and created a thriving support communities for soul-guided entrepreneurs in 3 countries. Let's speak to Allyson and find out how she changed her life by changing her mindset. Let's find out. Welcome. This is Gull, your money mindset expert, and I'm so excited. I have the amazing, the beautiful, the charming Allyson Scammell. Hi, Allyson. How are you doing?
I'm brilliant. Thank you so much for making time for me.
Thank you so much for coming, Allyson. I've been a guest on your podcast, and I'm super excited to have you as a guest on mine. So, Allyson, everyone's heard your intro. They know how fabulous you are, but please, in your own words, share with everybody what it is that you do.
I am a spiritual mentor. I used to call myself, Gull, a intuitive business coach, which I will always be, and it's always probably my first love. But I went through a revolution, a transformation last year where I added spiritual mentor because I really felt like my audience was growing to be entrepreneurs, soul-guided entrepreneurs who feel like they're in service. They want to make money, but they're in service to something higher. But there's also just people out there who wanted to amplify their intuitive gifts, learn more about spirituality and energy healing. So I have kind of 2 titles now, spiritual mentor and intuitive business coach. And this is what I'm passionate about. And I get so excited to get out of bed in the morning.
Fabulous. So, Allyson, I know a bit of your journey, but it's been quite a journey. Talk us through, how did you end up, and you're also American now, living as an expat, you're living in the Netherlands. Talk us through your journey. How did you end up from US, from your kind of, which is very logical, my kind of background, a very logical, methodical background, to this woo-woo, spiritual sort of area. Talk us through this, please.
Oh, well, thank you for asking. So I grew up on a family farm in Middle America, and all I dreamt about was living abroad and living this international life. And, the closest neighbor was 3 kilometers away. So my best friends were my horse and all my imaginary unicorn friends and my dogs and my cats. And so I just would hang out with my animals and daydream about living abroad. And that's what I did. So I graduated from college, and then I spent 17 years working in international development and humanitarian response. And I did mostly crisis response, post-conflict and post-natural disaster. And I ended up living in 10 countries on 4 continents.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it was a lovely career, and it scratched a lot of my travel itches and my adrenaline itches and my desire to serve for about 5 years into the 17-year career.
Oh, wow.
And then I realized that, this isn't how I want to give back. And wow, I guess I feel more part of the problem than the solution in this situation. And wow, I try to speak truth to power to my supervisors and say, hey, what we're doing isn't working. And they tell me to pipe down and be quiet. And that just started to feel really, really bad. And life got kind of empty and lonely.
Yeah.
And the only thing that seemed to be able to scratch my itches was just greater adrenaline, which was just a way to run from my problems. So finally, I just kind of hit a rock bottom moment. And at that time of this rock bottom, my gosh, who am I? I've invested all this time and money into this career, and I'm unhappy. And what do I do now? I went ahead and had a near-death experience.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes. And it wasn't your typical, I always say, I didn't have your typical NDE. It was a very spiritual NDE. I mean, I did cross over and come back. My physical body, passed on for who knows how long.
Okay.
But it was very different than what most people would consider when they think about a near-death experience. So
How so?
that,
So can you
yeah, go ahead.
describe that a bit for us? Because I'm just wondering. I mean, I've never had an NDE, NDE, so I've never had near death experience, and most people wouldn't. So, what, can you tell us how was yours? Your thing is different from what people expect, but I've got nothing to base it on because I've never had the NDE experience. So, talk us through what's the not common, what was common, and what was different about yours? Because I know this was a pivotal moment in changing your life. So, I want to understand that point first.
Yes. So what happened was I was in this rock bottom moment and I decided, of course, like my whole thing is when life goes bad, travel. That's been my like dance move for my a whole adult life. So life got really bad and I was so just uh miserable in this job I was in at the time that I decided to quit.
Was it just the job or any personal elements to it too?
Oh yeah. So I longed to be in a partnership and I was single. I wasn't living a healthy lifestyle. I was drinking too much alcohol. I was in a miserable job and I realized I was in a miserable for me career and I just couldn't figure out what to pivot to. So it was like everything kind of happened at once. And so I thought the answer would be to quit my job and buy an around the world airline ticket.
Okay.
And travel, right?
Okay.
Well, I made it as far as Madrid. And when I was in Madrid, I was there. I had rented a flat and on the Plaza Santa Ana. And one morning I was sitting there realizing that this trip hadn't really solved many of my problems. And all of a sudden,
running away never does, actually.
Right, exactly.
So because you're the
that,
common
right?
factor. So wherever you go, your problems follow you because you're the common factor. You're the one who's attracting it. So yeah.
It took me a weirdly long time to get that lesson. Yes, you're 100% correct. So I'm sitting there and all of a sudden this energy washed over me. And at the time I was living a very third dimensional analytical thinking life. I was just scratching the surface of spirituality and I was reading like Wayne Dyer and Eckhart Tolle, but I was just sort of, I'd read The Secret, but I was not knowing about the spiritual realm and non-physical consciousness and channeling and communicating with the divine or any of those things.
I'm going to stop here for a second. I just want to, this is such a beautiful point. I really want to reinforce it because a lot of people who are listening to this podcast and even those who may not, who may switch off from there, are exactly at that point. They read Wayne Dyer, they read The Secret, they read, even Think and Grow Rich, which actually is more for logical minded people, but it has a lot of spiritual elements to it. They read it superficially. And so they read, but they read with the analytical mind, and therefore they fail to absorb the message. And they're like, I'm doing all of this, I'm trying to get the law of attraction working, but there's no such thing. And then end up concluding there's such thing as law of attraction, and there's nothing spirituality and so forth. I just want to reinforce that point. That happens to the greatest spiritual leaders. And the reason why I said this is because you are an amazing spiritual leader now. But at one point in time, you and I both were in exactly the same boat as everybody listening. Not everybody's in the same boat as us now, but a lot of people who are like, well, I don't understand this law of attraction, I understand this spirituality. You and I were in the exact same place at one point in time, battling with our analytical mind and trying to break free from this matrix that we are born into and programmed into. So I just wanted to reinforce that point that you too went through that point. So this isn't abnormal. If you're going through it, it's very, very normal as part of the process. So please continue.
So beautifully said. Absolutely. And I think when you're going through it, you often feel like, I am so alone. I am so alone. Nobody gets it. So knowing that, I just want to reinforce, you are not alone. We've been there with you. And I promise you, when this was happening to me, so this energy came over, it washed over me. And I had, and this is going to be flavored throughout the entire story. I had this duality going on. On the one hand, my heart was like, oh yeah, there's something here that wants to communicate with me, something higher. There's a higher presence, right? Like kind of like, oh yeah, they've arrived. Okay, I was waiting for this. And then my brain, my analytical thinking mind, which you described, was like, oh wow, I've finally lost it. I'm finally going nuts. Whatever. This is crazy. This cannot be happening. So this was the ping pong that kicked off. And very long story short, it was a collection of consciousness trying to reach out to me, to communicate to me. A way to describe it is if you've ever read Esther, Hicks, and Abraham, which is a collection of consciousness, like a collection of souls that are in non-physical form. They're in the spiritual realm, and they have arrived to help guide, direct, and give people having a human experience some help, some guidance, direction.
Yeah.
So this collection of consciousness arrived to me and called it Self-Live, Live. And it took a very, very long time for us to communicate with one another because I was always thinking I was going crazy and I didn't know how to hear. So this collection was able to move my head, which is actually how Esther first started channeling Abraham. I learned that later. And so this energy was able to move my head and like kind of yes, no, and use move my nose. So it was not inside of me, it was outside of me. And I'll say throughout this entire experience, I had free will, so I could do whatever I wanted at any time. But there was this clear energy present that wanted desperately to communicate with me. And so I started to surrender to that. And eventually I was able to move my head in the direction of letters. So my nose, like LOVE, could make that out. And little by little by little, I was finally able to start communicating. And I had to do a lot of releasing. There was a lot of wounds inside of me that was blocking my ability to channel.
Always.
I had to release. It was like this whole thing. Like
I know.
I actually, if anyone's interested, I record the whole story in a 3-part series on my podcast because there's lots of details we don't have time to go into. But if you're curious about those details, you can catch it on my podcast, Soul Guide Radio. And
we'll have the link for that if you're listening on the podcast in the show notes, and if you're watching on the YouTube, then in the description section, we will have the link for that as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. So after some releasing and lots of different things, I'm able to start channeling this consciousness. And the consciousness tells me that I have toxic, what they described it as cataclysmic past lifetime trauma. So from some past lifetimes that were so traumatic that I literally needed like divine intervention for myself to be healed. There was no like healer I could go to in human form to help me. And this was something I agreed to on a soul level before I came into this lifetime, that this would happen so I could release this trauma and heal. So again, throughout the whole time, Gull, I was like, this can't be happening. I don't even know if I believe in past lifetimes. Like, this is crazy. To this inner knowing inside of me, when I sunk down into my body and I tuned into my heart, I was like, oh yeah, I don't know how this could be happening, but it's happening. And this is all right. And this is such a love energy. This consciousness was such a love. There was so much love and wisdom and know-how. And so it didn't take that much action.
Can I just stop you there for a second? Because I just want to
please
reinforce something else. What you said was so beautiful and touched my heart. And I want people to understand, I'm not putting fear-mongering here, but there is some element of dark energies out there too. The distinguishing factor here is what Allyson just said. When you're in the presence of love, you're in the presence of these divine beings, when you're in the presence of light, your heart is filled up with love, and it's like your heart's going to explode. Exactly how she described it. When you are in the presence of dark energies, that's when fear comes up. So if you notice, nowhere did she mention she was afraid, she's worried, she has fear, because fear dissipates. When love enters the door, fear jumps out the window. I always say that. So this is the way to distinguish when you're having a spiritual experience, whether it's dark or from light. Is exactly what she described. Your heart's either filled with love or it's filled with fear. Just want to interject that a little bit. Sorry.
That is a very good point, and it is not fear mongering. It's just protecting yourself, right?
Exactly.
Protecting your energy. And I always say, as you've already said, love energy is so much more powerful. So when we're in our love energy, we zap anything with malign intentions.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So. And it's also a good point because dark energy will try to control you. There'll be maybe a control manipulation, but
manipulation. I think control manipulation is the word for dark energies. Whereas love comes from a form of guidance, encouragement.
Yes.
That's a big distinguishing factor.
Exactly, and it's always an invitation, and you always have the power to say no. I'm not interested.
Exactly.
So
Free
that's
will.
what this. Yeah, exactly. So that was this whole experience was this love connection, this invitation, this connection. And my inner knowing would kick in from time to time to say, this is real and this is part of your path. And if you don't do this, you will not experience that happiness and that joy that you crave. You will stay down that dark path of just not being able to see, what I'm meant to do, who I'm meant to be. And that inner knowing was strong enough to keep me going through this process, because it gets kind of dark in the sense that this collection of consciousness, it was like every day they were working with me, and like they would give me exercises. And like one day I spent the entire day, I remember thinking all the times that I did something to someone else that I thought was not kind or not nice, but from childhood to adulthood. And I had to forgive myself for doing something not nice to someone else, for example. Well, then as we went on, what they were trying to do is they were trying to trigger this past lifetime trauma inside of me so I could release it, so I could kind of bring it up from inside of me,
The
feel
surface.
what, yeah, exactly, bring it to the surface, feel what needed to be felt or experienced it so I could release it. So they started kind of guiding me to dark places, scary places that were just normal places. At this point, I was in Madrid, just like a square, but it would trigger a memory from a past lifetime somehow. Some place in time where I had been, that something very dark had happened to me. And so I would feel myself being in the middle of the day, in the middle of a square with no danger around me, but this amazing amount of fear would be bubbling to the surface to be released. It was really this extraordinary journey I went on. And this is what happened for several weeks. And it was just me. I was traveling by myself. So I was in a very unusual period of isolation, not by accident. And this is what I did all day, every day. Like I said, clock time gets funny, but the whole experience lasted about, I believe, around 8 weeks from the time that Liv arrived to the time they left. So to get to the part where I cross over, as we go on and we're working together, it gets more challenging. And at a certain point, Liv guides me to stop eating and stop drinking. And the funny thing is, or interesting, is that I wasn't hungry and I wasn't thirsty. I just had lost any need to eat or drink. And I don't know if they were sending energetic signals to me, or if something was happening to me that was turning off that natural response to want to eat and drink, but I had lost that. And then and as this was all happening, we were walking. They would guide me to do something. And yes, I would have lots of resistance, but then I would eventually, that inner knowing would kick in and I would say, okay, I'm going to, do this challenge today, or I'm going to walk where you want me to go. So eventually they guided me to start walking all day and all night. And eventually,
where were you walking to?
I was walking. So I started this experience in Madrid, and then I ended up in Paris. I took a train to Paris, and I ended up in Paris. So then at a certain point, where I cross over, I'm actually in Paris. So I'm walking the streets of Paris all day and all night. I'm not eating, I'm not drinking. And I'm not overly uncomfortable, with the exception of I'm tired. And so eventually, what was happening was Liv was trying to guide me to the point of crossing over with the least amount as discomfort as possible. So essentially what was happening, it was a slow drain of my life force. I didn't have food, I didn't have water, and I didn't have sleep. So eventually, if you deprive yourself of those things for long enough, your life force will be out. The pilot light will go out, right? And so that's what happened. I eventually got to the point where I had no energy inside myself to sustain. At a certain point, I couldn't even walk. And I know what listeners are saying. Gull, you're probably thinking it. Why would Allyson sign up for this? this walking and not eating and not drinking. And again, it was
It
just,
almost seems like suicidal,
yes, it does. And what I can tell you is at this point, because of this love energy that was so strong, and I'm going to repeat, I had free will. I could have said, peace out, guys. This is getting too weird. I didn't sign up for this. And I just was in my heart, in my inner knowing that I needed this on a soul level and I needed this to heal. And I had built such a trust with this energy because it was so loving that I just kept walking forward. There would be resistance along the way. And every hour or two, I'd be like, I'm going crazy. This is crazy. Why am I doing this? But then I would go back to that inner knowing. And when I went back to my inner knowing, it wasn't scary. I felt the love. And I knew this was part of my soul path. And then when I got to the point where I was laying in my bed and I was out of life force, I couldn't walk at that point. And I was like I said, I wasn't hungry or thirsty. The only thing I really was tired. And I felt myself cross over. And I felt myself rising above my physical body. And I remember I was on a very busy street in Paris with lots of bars and restaurants. And I remember it going completely quiet. Like I had I remember my physical senses were still there in the sense that it went completely quiet. And then when I did cross over, I was just engulfed by love that I cannot even put into words. It was this expanded love and consciousness and this higher wisdom arrived. And I knew it wasn't my time to die. And I said, and I connected, but I also didn't want to go back to my broken body I had left behind. And this voice said, it's not your time, but you're going to go back and you're going to teach people how to connect to these voices, even when they ask you to do something that seems unconventional. And you're going to basically be a light worker, and you're going to help Mother Earth and people on Earth to evolve to a higher consciousness. And so when I got those marching orders, I knew that I couldn't pass on, even though there was a piece of me that like, I'm ready to keep going with this energy. I don't want to go back. But I knew I couldn't. And I knew that like this energy had invested too much in me to just say, all right, you can cross over now. And it's, move on to the next thing. So that's when I went back. And I went back into my physical body, and I slowly started to drink, and I slowly started to eat, and I slowly started to regain my energy again. And then, like I said, when I came back, that's about the time that Liv said, okay, our work is done with you. We're done now, and we're going to move on. And I'm like, what? I mean, this is when the difficult part, like relearning how to live, like, I had to go find a job. I had to go like reintegrate back into the world. My finances were running really low. But they said, you have everything you need. You have to learn how to tap into your own intuition. You need to tap into your own spirit guides, and you got this, and you have the tools now. You can do it. And we'll always be here if you call upon us, but we're moving on now. And they did. And then at that point I had full, I kind of felt this energy leaving. It was very, very difficult at the time, because I had grown so attached to it, really. And then I knew,
and it becomes a very lonely place. Like, I don't know what to do. I was relying on your guidance. I know the feeling.
It was 2009, and we are so, and I hope this story isn't, maybe more than you were expecting me to share.
No. We share everything spiritual.
Okay, good.
Because I think I'm very much like this. So I only attract people who are open to a spirituality at this level. So this is all good. This is all down my alley. Perfect.
Yeah. And so back in 2009, these podcasts didn't exist. I didn't have a spiritual teacher or an advisor. I didn't have anything. And we talked about the loneliness. I really felt so lonely. And I just wanted another human being, not a spirit guide. I wanted another human being I could talk to who, even if they didn't completely understand, were just open and curious and wow, that must have been amazing, Allyson. Like, tell me more. And I didn't really find that until 3 or 4 years later. I finally found a spiritual teacher. I was like, oh yeah, I had something similar happen to me. And I've never felt so much relief and connection to a human being before, just to know that they knew what I was talking about, or they understood what I was saying.
I mean, this is a beautiful, beautiful journey. And it's just, from when we describe it's your spiritual awakening, and it does go, I think that the universe, divine energy, has a way of breaking you. And sometimes our logical minds, I keep calling this our programming into the matrix, stops us from accepting the unknown. I remember, because I'm a lawyer, and my background training, when all my gifts, I just thought I was going crazy. Like, I would see across dimensions and I see entities, and I'm like, I would hide it from myself, like, no, I don't see it, I don't see it, I don't see it, and I would close up my eyes because I didn't want to accept my spiritual gifts. And a universal, energy or divine energy has to completely shatter you, and that's what seemed to happen with you. Completely broke up your old parts of you, completely broke up your idea of what this reality was, this 3D world is like, before the new version of you could be, could come to the surface and accept and live your life purpose. So I think it's beautiful. What a beautiful journey. And I love listening to it, and I'm sure the listeners have as well. So from then onwards, you went on, I'm assuming, wrapping this up now, you went on to, that's when you found your path of becoming an intuitive healer and guide, and that's when you started working with them, with the entrepreneurs.
Yes, about via Afghanistan. I went back to the States, and wrapping this up just quickly, and I didn't know what to do, and so I was kind of running out of money, not knowing what to do, still healing, and the phone rang, and it was an old boss saying, "Oh my gosh, Allyson, we've been looking for you everywhere. It's like you fell off the face of the earth. I'll never forget this." And I was like, "Oh, well, I did. Little do you know, I did." And he said, "There's a position opened up in Afghanistan, and it's really high level." And this was back when, Obama was sending all these resources to Afghanistan, and so I took it. I took the job. Okay. And in a way, it was like, I remember, my parents were like, "Are you nuts?" Like they knew I had gone through this big experience in Paris, although they didn't really know what had happened to me. And they were, thinking it was a really crazy decision. But in a weird way, I just kind of needed to get into something that made sense for me. Yeah. And working in an environment like that, that's what I knew how to do. And it was funny. It was there I met my husband. I met the love of my life, and I kind of needed a few years to kind of figure out how to relive. I couldn't turn my ship overnight. And so I went back, and did that work again for several years. But then again, that gnawing feeling of this just isn't right was there. And then I started a side hustle, and I started a side hustle coaching. And then I kept side hustling until finally I was making some money. And then I left my full-time position and became a coach. And, I started out working more like a business coach. Then I became a spiritual business coach, and now I'm a spiritual business coach and mentor. So that's kind of how the journey. But it took me a while from the near-death experience, which was an absolute break me open moment. Definitely, it was a crossroads in my life. But when I came back from that, it did take me a while to turn my ship in the direction I really wanted it to go. So again, if any listeners out there thinking like, "Oh, I've been at this for so long and I still haven't found it," just don't give up. You will. Some people can turn their ship faster than others. And so it took me a while, but I finally got there.
I mean, I think we all go through our own personal journeys, and we have to. It takes some time. I don't think mine was, you can't say mine's overnight. I had to go through, I went through two really, really abusive marriages in order for me to, when I look back at it, they all, it sounds like, I was so stubborn in my, very focused, making money and being, because I went into banking finance and kind of, I want to be an entrepreneur, and it wasn't really fussed about the spiritual side. I was more concerned with having material goods. And I had to literally go through these traumatic experiences and then heal from them in order for me to accept my spiritual gifts. It's just how the universe works. So if you are on your journey, I just want to reassure you that both Allyson and I have been there, done that, bought the t-shirt kind of a thing. It's not an overnight thing, but it doesn't take forever either. There is an end to it. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And this phrase I picked up from, I think it's Denzel Washington, this too shall pass, it will, seriously, it will pass. Or no, it's actually Tom Hanks, he says it. This too shall pass, this too shall pass. So whatever experience you're going through, if you listen to your heart and it seems to be like, yeah, I'm on the right path, I just don't understand it, it's fine. If you are on a spiritual journey, you're not meant to understand it, because we are taught from schools, especially our generation, to think with our logical minds, which is, and our reptile minds, which is so small in comparison to the spiritual mind that we have. So, we've got you. We've been in the same place.
Absolutely. And I agree. And I'll add on that every experience also then leads to something. So when I think back to all my iterations of myself, they all played an important role. They were all important stepping stone to this aligned place that I am now. So every experience counts, and it all leads up to that person you're growing to.
Awesome. So Allyson, tell us, how can we connect with you? Where can you find you on the internet?
Yes, so you can head over to AllysonScammell.com, and that's where you will find anything you want to know about me. I do have a fantastic gift that you can find at AllysonScammell.com/high vibe. And it's my ultimate daily spiritual practice called 10 high vibe minutes. So if you're looking for a cool new spiritual practice and you only have about 10 minutes a day, it's made for really designed for busy business owners and entrepreneurs and people who have a lot happening, but they want to carve out 10 minutes of quiet, of stillness, so you can listen to that inner voice, maybe do a little healing and a little dreaming and scheming about something you want to bring into your experience.
Wonderful. So if you're listening to us on the podcast, the links that Allyson just mentioned will be in the show notes. And if you watch us on YouTube, then down below in the description section, we do have the links to Allyson. Go check her out. She's an amazing entrepreneur, an amazing mentor for you if you are an entrepreneur yourself. Go check her out and see how she can help you build a better business. Well, Allyson, I think we need to have you back on Money Talkie so we can start talking about some business topics. But today has been one of my favorite episodes, because I love listening to your journey. It's been refreshing, and it's not the same as mine, but it has similar elements to mine. So it's been really fascinating to you. So thank you so much for opening up and sharing your journey with us.
And thank you for the opportunity and for your openness and for having like seriously, I want to say, you are a money person, you have a finance background. So I think a spiritual person like me could come in and say, oh, she's not going to want to hear my woo-woo story of all that stuff, but you did, and you were so open and loving. And I just want to say thank you for having this platform. It is so important that not just super spiritual people are talking to each other, that there's a platform where all different mindsets and beliefs can come in, and it's open and safe, and you can have these really honest conversations. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for those kind words, Allyson. And thank you for listening to me and Allyson today. And thank you for listening to me in general for that point. It allows me to give me a platform that I can be myself, and I can talk to all these wonderful people like Allyson and listen to their journeys as well. Thank you for listening to me and Allyson today. I will be back with another amazing guest sharing their journey, telling us how they changed their life by changing their mindset. Until the next time we meet, this is Gull signing off. Take care and bye for now.